Hey guys, and welcome to our first review. This one is actually on a game we've just completed a playthrough of, Transformers War for Cybertron. If you're interested in a more first impressions kind of deal of this game, or you just want to watch Simon suffer, click the annotation you should be seeing now to watch this. Or if you want to just have our thoughts on this, stick around. On the whole, it starts off strong. For each mission you get to choose from one of three iconic characters from each faction, usually including at least one that I know of, for example Megatron, Optimus, and a few that I'm less aware of, but they're probably well known by Transformers fans, for example Barricade and a few others. Each of these come in one of four predefined roles: soldier, scientist, scout or leader. Obviously someone like Optimus will be more of a leader, Bumblebee more of a scout. The class alongside the actual character itself affects which abilities and weapons you get, so take a good look at each one before you select it. The story starts off following the Decepticons for the first half of the game as they attempt to do generally evil stuff really, destroy their enemies, take over the world, what you'd expect from the Decepticons to be honest. Then about halfway through it swaps over to the Autobot perspective as they attempt to stop this with questionable results. While being mostly predictable fare, the story was actually entertaining throughout, held up mostly by its cast of main characters and the supporting cast of others. I started the first mission playing as Megatron, which of course is the correct way to play any game with Transformers in the title, and was given access to the fusion cannon as a starting weapon. This feels almost godlike as you blow apart the puny Autobots that stand in your way. In comparison, however, some other weapons in the game are a mixed bag of weak feeling shots, with a few standout exceptions like the Null Ray, basically a sniper rifle, which can deal heavy damage to anything stupid enough to stand still. Basically it blows them apart, which is quite fun to watch. The abilities, while at least being moderately varied throughout, mostly come from a shared pool. Megatron starts with Hover and Drain. Hover makes you hover in midair for several seconds. This is helpful for clearing gaps, but also gives quite a nice damage buff to every shot, which, especially with the fusion cannon, blows things apart in one hit. His Drain ability is more interesting, however. I didn't see this on any other character, and basically it makes you almost invincible. You hold up one of your arms, firing your weapon with the other, because obviously Megatron is a bit of a beast, and while you're doing this, you drain energy, which quite quickly actually refills your health, while also damaging anything nearby. The downside of this is actually quite a large cooldown, but it did seem like kills might have been lowering this, though I didn't really fully test that throughout it. The rest of the abilities were interesting if not really standout. There's a standard dash to avoid damage with quite a low cooldown. And one of the ones that I saw which was actually quite interesting was Optimus's unique war cry. I only found this on him and it did feel moderately powerful, lowering the damage taken while also boosting your own damage and also affecting nearby allies with this. But then again, this was only for the player who got the first pick of Optimus, and obviously whoever gets the first pick would pick Optimus because, you know, everybody else is just stupid. As you may already know, this game actually has co-op, and it's not just a tacked-on co-op like most co-op games get these days. You can actually play through the entire single-player campaign in co-op, and to be honest, it seems it's more designed towards this. At all times you actually have two AI companions, and in the actual co-op version, each of you gets to choose one of these per mission. This is quite fun, but the single-player is actually good for a laugh too, without seeming impossible with the AI partners you're left with. They have pretty stupid AI to be honest, but they're pretty much invincible, so playing through it by yourself, if you don't have anybody else who has the game, is actually quite fun. Matchmaking had some issues when we started, making it almost impossible to play for the first few days due to Simon having authentication errors, but we cleared this moderately quickly, and past that we've had no further issues with it. You do need to create an in-game profile and add friends via this, but other than the issues we had with authentication to start with, we've had no further issues with the actual in-game matchmaking. So, in honesty, it's not really a terrible addition. For example, it's not Games for Windows Live terrible, but it is an additional level that could cause you problems. Of the little time I spent playing the actual multiplayer portion of the game, it seemed like it was pretty much standard fare. Character selection is interesting, but this mode is limited by the low amount of levels and players actually online, with a peak of around 60 while I was actually looking. There is actually the standard deathmatch, team deathmatch, conquest, which is kind of king of the hill, code of power, which is pretty much capture the flag, countdown to extinction, which was quite interesting, planting bombs to destroy the enemy base, power struggle, which is a mobile king of the hill, and escalation, co-op versus enemies. It's got a large selection of actual modes, but none of them are really what you'd call something to get the game for. Escalation takes place on 2 different maps, one for the Autobots and one for the Decepticons, so it can get a little samey, but then again, people are still playing Call of Duty Ghosts, Zombies or whatever it's called now, so, you know, it's not too bad. The other modes, which are all more based towards the player versus player side of the multiplayer, take place across 8 maps. They are a pretty solid addition to the multiplayer, but due to the community size, it's not really a reason to purchase the game. You can get many other things that are about the same as this, if not better quality, on the free-to-play market or otherwise, that would be better if you're aiming towards the actual multiplayer section. This is mostly a game to get for the single player, though the multiplayer is quite nice. There is one aspect I've not covered yet, and that's the actual transformations for each character, clues in the name of the game really. Each one can transform into either a ground vehicle or a flying vehicle, depending on the character and the requirements of the mission. There are some missions which are completely based around the flying aspect. For example, there's one where you play a Starscream, and through the majority of it, it was against flying enemies. There were some bits in corridors, but even at those bits you could still utilise your flying transformation. The other side of it is that, for example, on the missions where you're playing with Megatron, you can fight some flying enemies, but it's all based around moving down a set path in a corridor. This is a bit of a corridor shooter. There are some nice open areas to explore, but there's not normally multiple paths. Each of the transformations actually comes with their own unique weapons, which again fall into the category of a mix of awesome feeling, for example, Megatron's tank cannon, and those that are slightly underwhelming, which are the ones that you'd usually get in the scout cars, for example Bumblebee. They get a set of machine guns which, while they do an okay amount of damage, they feel a bit weak. Each of these weapons also has limited ammo, which needs to be filled up with the same ammo boxes that fill up your normal weapons, with the exception of the flying missions. In these, each of the planes has 2 weapons, a set of miniguns and a set of homing rockets usually. These are quite good, though they don't do as much damage as your other weapons, because obviously they have unlimited ammo, so you can just sit there firing away with them forever. They do need to reload, and it is quite a lengthy reload, but if you use the mechanic of just swapping between the 2, you should be okay. The vehicles overall actually felt quite cool, but the only issue I had with them really was that each of them didn't really feel different from the others. Megatron's tank was obviously much slower than the other vehicles, but other than that it really controlled in pretty much a similar way. This might be due to their nature of being hover vehicles, so basically they're all bouncy castles that are floating around at different speeds, which, while not the greatest, it does give you the ability to switch between characters and not feel like you're completely nerfed on one compared to the other. As I said at the start, I did actually mostly enjoy this. The story does move at a good pace throughout the majority of it, and it can be suitably cinematic in places. The several bosses you fight are interesting with multiple phases, though they did feel like they were mostly similar. The idea in the way to defeat them, normally wait for this thing to open to shoot it, but getting to that point in each one was usually different, so quite interesting overall. If you're a fan of the more casual third-person shooter and want to have some fun with a bunch of friends, I would recommend grabbing this. Just be aware that on each level there will be a fight for the shiniest robot, Megatron or Optimus for example. If you aren't interested in the co-op side of this game and only really want to get it for competitive multiplayer experience, I would actually say skip this and go for something else. The one mode that I really did enjoy in the multiplayer was actually the Escalation, which is more of a co-op than an actual player versus player experience. If you want something that's more towards the actual multiplayer competitive experience, I would recommend looking on the free-to-play market. For example, just off the top of my head, Blacklight Retribution. They have larger player bases and are quicker at doing matchmaking than this, and a lot more consistent. You have to get on at the right day at the right time on this to possibly get a match, and it'll usually be against the same people who will probably cave your face in. Overall, I don't really like giving full opinions on things, as in if you should buy it or not, but if you like the co-op side, I would say go for this. If you don't really like the look of that, I would say skip it. This game has been on sale many times, so if you spot it and it's quite cheap, have a look at it. The newer games are obviously out and they're pretty much more of the same thing, but the story of this isn't going to be exactly the same as those, so it's worth a try, really. Overall, this is a good game. I would definitely recommend having a look at it if you're interested in the co-op side, or if you just want to play it by yourself. It's been on sale a fair few times, so you could probably get it quite cheaply at some point in the future. If you're not interested in waiting, obviously it's currently a little overpriced in my opinion, especially from the fact that some of the newer games of this series are out, but if you can get it at a good price, I would definitely recommend it. Anyway, thank you for watching guys, that was my first error review, so hopefully you liked it. If you didn't like it, leave in the comments why, and I'll try and make it better. If not, then thanks, and have a nice day.